All right, we've got a somewhat clear day out here in Boise. I've had some trouble recently with the smoke getting out as much as I would like to in this new On Cloudboom Strike 2. I want to do my full review of this one. I want to do some faster running. I did do some intervals a couple weeks back, but wanted to roll around and film the next week, and at the same time the smoke did roll in, so it's a little bit okay. I thought it would be a fun idea anyway to do a little bit of a comparison between a trail super shoe, something that I typically focus on, and a road running super shoe, something that I don't typically focus on, but I have run a road marathon within the last year, so I do like to run fast on the roads here and there. There are some interesting topics to cover, little points of interest between specifically two different super shoes from the same brand. I thought it'd be interesting to compare and contrast different approaches that they take between the trail and the road. But before I do that, and before any smoke rolls in, I do want to pop off a little bit of a run here. It's not my speed day today, but figured I'd take advantage of the weather situation, maybe do some strides for sure, and just maybe talk about this Cloudboom Strike 2 a little bit on the run. Latest technology with the Cloudboom Strike 2, as you could probably see, is the CloudTec Sphere, as they're calling it here. That is these thin gaps built into the midsole here. You can see clear through both sides. I'm not sure if I'm getting the right angle here, but essentially gaps in the midsole. You can see they're bridged just by a tiny bit of foam here, a little bit in the middle there, and then the outsole, of course. You can see the curved carbon speed board embedded in there. We'll take a closer look later, but the sphere refers to these three sections and the gaps in between, and what they're saying is that's giving enhanced flexibility, probably I would say a little bit of feel too. Again, you're on top of a carbon fiber plate, a lot of Helion HF super foam here. This is their latest formulation from On. They're claiming 15% lighter, more energy return as well compared to their first generation of Helion HF, which is probably what you've got here, at least in this softer top layer of the Cloud Ultra Pro. Of course, with this trail shoe here, dual layer setup, you do have a firmer Helion HF down on this layer here. So softer here, firmer here. They do mention in the tech sheets here that it is a dual layer setup of Helion HF in the Cloudboom Strike 2, but I'm not sure if it is a different formulation between the two layers. Well, let's take a quick sneak peek before I head out on the run. You do have kind of sort of a drop in midsole here, and just based on feel, it's hard to tell because having this be totally on its own here and this being somewhat contained by the upper and also the outsole here, you get a different impression squeezing this versus kind of trying to feel this when it's like loose on its own here. I'm not sure if there are different durometers here, but you have a healthy amount here on top of the speed board here. This sits obviously on the upper layer, and you can see that curved carbon speed board in there. So this is quite an interesting setup. You don't often see, I think you can see right down there, it goes way to the front there. So this is a full length, full, I would say, width as far as carbon fiber plate goes. You have a little cutout here. Sometimes they do this, I feel like, I don't know, this little hole makes a little bit of a difference, but you do have a little hole back there, but it is essentially full length sandwiched within these two layers of foam. What you see here on the outside, wrapping a touch a bit up on the side, so maybe this, where this break is on the side here, that kind of wraps along the outside, and then you have this, it's sort of a drop-in midsole laying on top of that. So it is a bit thicker under the forefoot though, so you're primarily, at least for more efficient runners and, you know, speedier pros and stuff, you're gonna land more midfoot, forefoot, and it's definitely thicker up here. So if you're worried about feeling the carbon fiber plate, sometimes you can feel a stiff and firm plate in any type of shoe where it's embedded. You do have a thicker bit here, and it's like even squeezing, I'm squeezing it pretty hard and I can't really compress it, pancake it all the way down. Heel's definitely much thinner though, but with this type of shoe, they're really banking on you having your weight leaning more forward, more on the forefoot, and certainly also the middle of the shoe. let's talk specs while I'm lacing up here. First off, sizing. I've got both of these shoes in a US 10, EU 44. Actually, why don't I take a look at the toe boxes while I'm here? One thing that's great specifically about the Cloudboom Strike 2, because it is a road shoe, typically those tend to be a little bit tighter, and certainly in my experience in the past in road super shoes, a little bit of squeezing and having to kind of work with a fit that isn't as comfortable as some trail shoes, specifically and especially this Cloud Ultra Pro. I find that this is one of the nicer volume and also toe box shapes in a trail super shoe. So this is one I often recommend for people that are looking for something that is not too aggressive. For one, in terms of ride, it's a very smooth ride. Feels like it rides more like a training shoe or all-around versatile shoe, not a crazy aggressive plated super shoe, certainly not like a road super shoe, but even compared to other trail shoes. But coming back to the toe box here, always love this one, always recommended for those looking for a comfort fit, especially in terms of width at the forefoot and also space in the toes. You can see it's quite squared off even at the very front, and just further back of that, it's maintains width here. So a lot of those small toes, you're not going to get any rubbing at all. Even on the big toe side, there is a little bit of bumper of space here, at least I find for my foot shape. This is one of the best and most spacious, comfortable toe boxes of any trail super shoe on the market. And of course, you got a little bit more taper in this one. I've got this one already on, but I find this quite wide. I've run in Nike super shoes in the past, different versions of the Vaporfly Rocket X3, which is quite comfortable from Hoka, but does have a little bit of a, kind of taper to it. Again, that shoe, I'm running like 2.5 hours plus in that. Not as much of a concern over, say, a 12-hour ultra marathon that you'd be running in a shoe like this, but compared to other super shoes, certainly the ones that I've run from Nike in the past, this is quite, I would say, a wide toe box, and you can see I am kind of not overly squeezing it, just a little bit, but it does feel like it allows my foot to kind of absorb ground impact and give me a lot better feel along with that CloudTec sphere. Just really love the toe box here. Coming back to the weight, 7.4 ounces, 210 grams in this Cloudboom Strike 2. Again, that's for a US 10, EU 44. They give a spec weight of 191 grams, and that usually refers to a US size 9. So from 191 spec to 210 in this US 10 here, that's pretty good because they're not trying to fudge the numbers there. It seems about accurate to me. Stack height, I do get 42 at the heel. Now, this is going to be a world marathon officially sanctioned shoe, of course, so you'll know that the maximum stack height at the heel is 40 millimeters, but they do some kind of special measurement how they officially measure that. So I would imagine, I don't think I saw an official spec number, but I would imagine it's like 39.5 or maybe even exactly 40. The way I measure is a little bit unscientific, but I would say somewhat accurate. I just stick it on the floor, use a combo square, and run it inside as best as I can find what I think is the center point of the heel. Now, World Athletics, they may use some calculation, they may measure it in a slightly different area as where I measure or what I think is the actual heel. So that's why I just come up with 42. So don't be worried about this being illegal or anything like that. It is certainly perfectly legal, and I would expect your standard road marathon super shoe 40 millimeters at the heel. So again, 5 mil drop. So I've got 42.37 based on my measurements unscientifically, but I would expect something like 40.35 officially. So I'll be approaching this one from the perspective of a primarily trail runner, but I have run a road marathon recently again. Back in the fall, did the Munich Marathon. I did run my PR of 2:34, so just to give you a little context of what I'm actually running on the roads. As far as my marathon super shoe background, since super shoes have come on the market, I ran the first few in that fly knit version of the Vaporfly. I think that was the second version, not that original baby blue one. Then I ran a bunch in the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. That one had the craziest, or I still have it in the box, it has the craziest foot shape of any kind of shoe I've ever run in.
Had to just deal with it to get the super shoe effect. And then again, the Munich Marathon this past fall in the Hoka Rocket X3, which was, up until this point, the most comfortable upper of any super shoe that I've run in on the roads. This one is probably giving it a run for its money. Slightly different shape and fit and ride orientation, but I think this one is even more comfortable. Stop for a quick lacing adjustment here. I think I tied my right shoe a little too tight. I was talking about liking the space up here, but I'm feeling a little bit too tight around this area, the area I believe where the plate kind of curves under the arch. And that was actually the first thing I wanted to talk about in this review, so I'll talk about it a little bit now. It is full feeling under the arch. I mean, it just feels like where that plate is and where that upper midsole kind of curves down, I just feel full support under the arch, which in turn, at least for me, makes me want to be careful about my lacing in that midfoot area. I don't want to squeeze my foot too much into that upper midsole and into that point where the speed board has that curve down into the forefoot. So typically a lot of these carbon fiber plates will start a little higher and then they'll sweep down into that forefoot to kind of give that levering effect. But that part where it makes that little dip down, that's a part where you can feel pressure under the middle of the foot. So I think I just tied it a little bit too tight around the middle of the shoe here, and compared to my left foot, feeling a little bit pressure there, but it is a full feeling under the arch. And that is the, again, first thing I wanted to talk about. Again, the foot shape is fantastic here. Really forefoot, midfoot oriented. So under the forefoot, you have your widest point, as with all or most super shoes. That really feels like the point. It feels like the point of maximum bounciness in this shoe. Like if you're landing like right on this spot, that's where you get the maximum effect of that Helion HF. Now throw in the effect of that curved carbon speed board, having the bounce off of this really big platform under the ball of the foot, plus the effect of the lever action of that carbon speed board there, and that's what makes this shoe like rocket off the ground. Really, rocket may not be the right word. I want to use the term like it has this trampoline type effect, because you feel the effect, the bounce of this Helion HF in this area, but then you also feel with the full feeling under the arch, you feel like you kind of load that area and then the carbon plate releases, while at the same time you're bouncing off this substantial Helion HF here. I'm doing the full review here in my first little stop off, but that's okay. It's just amazing, like when you find the sweet spot on the ride of this shoe, it just feels like you can land, target that spot, and you could almost feel the loading and unloading and the takeoff of this shoe off the ground. It's just a very noticeable sensation when you do hit that spot. Now, I'm not on a speed day today here. I'll probably throw a little strides at the end, but really just an easy run, and it's kind of hard to keep these shoes down. I'm just trying to turn the legs over here, and I'm doing 7:35 pace right now, and honestly, I'm really like trying to run slow, and the shoe is just going. So aside from a few sessions with some strides, as I'm gonna do today, I have done 2 actual speed work sessions in this shoe, one on the road and next one on the treadmill due to wildfire smoke. These were actually my first speed work sessions in a while. I've been dealing with injuries early in the season, pulled hamstring most recently. This shoe has just been perfect for that, because I do feel like it's helping me go fast, certainly with the carbon speed board there and the energetic foam. Even though I don't have a base of speed work in my legs over the course of the season, I'm still feeling that pop off the ground. I'm still feeling quick in just these really 2 sessions back. Those sessions were pretty solid. I did 8 and then 10 times 2x2, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes recovery. And 2 minutes is pretty good to get into it, because you don't feel like you're extending yourself too much, but you could also get into a bit of a groove Well, certainly once you get past the 1 minute mark, and with me wanting to be a little bit on the more careful side of things, coming back to speed here, I probably did those 2 minute on segments. I definitely did those closer to my marathon pace versus what you would more typically do for shorter intervals like that, 2 minutes, typically going a little bit harder. For me, they felt really great in that zone. I could lock in again with 2 minutes being just enough time to get a feel for it, and I was hitting my actual marathon paces and at the same time feeling quite smooth, which if you're racing the marathon, you'll know that's what you want to feel. It also feels with that loading and unloading effect, that spring, that energy return coming from that combination of the plate and the foam, it does feel like I can really up the pace and the shoe does respond. So it works well to kind of lock into that harder marathon type pace, tempo pace, and even more of those interval type paces. Certainly I've been doing some strides here and there, which I'll do later on. It does feel like the plate, you just load it a little bit more and it responds a little bit more. So great for faster running too and shorter races. Wow, 3.5 miles has flown by here. I didn't have a kind of target for this run today. I'm still on my way out, so this will at least be a 7-miler. But I am at 7:15 pace right now, and I feel like I'm not even trying. If you like to train your kind of easy days, maybe your endurance runs, steady state runs, 7:10 here in a super shoe. Wow, could be a great pick for that too. I'm just cruising here. As with most, if not all, road super shoes, you do have a little bit of fall off in stability towards the heel of the shoe. These types of shoes, you don't necessarily have to be a forefoot, midfoot striker. You can strike at the heel, but they definitely want the balance of your weight forward, definitely landing under your center of the mass. Forward leaning, of course, you're just gonna get the most impact absorption from the volume of foam up front. Also the most of that trampoline effect that I was talking about when you're landing that weight under your center of the mass with that carbon speedboard. And also forward leaning, you want to get into that toe rocker there, not linger on the shoe. You always want to keep the tempo up, keep the turnover high, and keep the shoe rolling. Stability is also another great feature of this shoe, and I think an advantage of this shoe compared to other super shoes, that wide fit across the ball of the foot. I don't feel squeezed at all. Sometimes super shoes, they can feel like they want to squeeze your foot or direct the force of the ball of your foot to a more kind of centered point under the middle of the foot, and this one just feels a little bit different. It feels like it's allowing the force to spread out a little bit wider under the ball of the foot. That is giving me great comfort for sure, and it's certainly going to help with impact over the course of, you can see I'm running on concrete here. Feels great on these exceptionally hard surfaces, and once you get into the later stages of a marathon, I feel like allowing your foot and the force to spread out a little bit more with this wider platform. Maybe the platform is not necessarily wider, but the fit certainly is, and that's allowing your foot to just absorb easier. And I just love this so far compared to any other road marathon shoe that I've run in. Hit my turnaround there, 5.3 miles, so I'll be over 10 for the day. Pop off some strides on the way back here, maybe a couple miles, and then do those towards the end. I do want to talk about the rear of the shoe here. There is a split lengthwise of the midsole, most prominently under the rear of the shoe. And that's going to affect stability, of course, but most road shoes are not particularly stable for heel landings, bombing, steep descents, that type of thing. I think that's something you just have to get used to if you were running that type of course or grades in a road super shoe. That split in the midsole at the rear part of the shoe, of course, saves weight, but I think it also enhances stability in a certain way on touchdown. When your heel touches down on the ground, sometimes if it's a little blocky in the heel, it can almost feel like it's throwing your ankle in a certain way that it doesn't want to go. So I think having that split there, obviously you're more likely going to land on the lateral side, the outside on heel touchdown. And I think it just gives a little bit more adaptability when that part of the shoe touches the ground and not having the entire heel kind of twist your foot a little bit. There are obviously times where you may want that heel to be a little bit more stable, but that again is a judgment call. Local race we have here in town that I've talked about before, Race to Roby Creek, which is primarily on dirt. A lot of the top runners run in road super shoes. I've run in the Vaporfly Next Percent 2 before. That's the type of scenario where road super shoe is advantageous for the speed aspect and certainly the cushion aspect running that steep downhill, but you again have to judge. You're primarily going to be bombing down on the heel in the backside of a race like that, and I want to judge how stable you'll feel with a split kind of midsole under the rear in this one versus something more uniform like that Vaporfly or even the Rocket X3. That being said, this is my favorite road super shoe of all time. So far, I don't, again, test every road super shoe, but if I had a road marathon, Race to Roby Creek, anything where I would pick any road style super shoe, this will be the one that I'll be running in next. All right, we got some smooth flat spots coming up. Let's do some strides. I do 20 seconds, 20 steps ramp up, 20 steps nice and smooth, and 20 steps to ramp down. And when you add that up, that always comes out to almost exactly an even 20 seconds. So that's the 20-second stride protocol. First one there, got down to about 540. Just loosening up. The first one's always a little funny feeling. Second one there, hit 5 minutes per mile. Warming up a little bit. Always start gradually. Things tend to open up naturally. So I just did about 7 or 8 strides. I lost count there. Most were getting down to around 5 minutes. A couple dipping into 440, 445, depending on undulations of this path here. Again, I'm doing a 20-step ramp up. So then 20 steps, whatever speed I'm at the end there, I lock that in for the next 20 steps. So you could only get going so fast within that amount of steps. And again, I'm not trying to go full out either. Don't want to pop off any injuries while I'm at it here. But I do want to take a quick stop here. Take a look at the toe box here. Again, I was talking about comfort earlier and my sizing here, US 10, EU 44. And check where I'm at as far as length. Not a full thumb's width. Probably about 2/3, which is kind of, that's okay. That's where I want to be. A half may feel a little bit short. Certainly for road trainers, I could get away with it. But if you are going to be out there for a long marathon, you might want to be on the other side of a half a thumb's width, which I think I am here. I'm about 2/3 here. If I lean forward here, I had questions about how to check your sizing in shoes. I tend to squat down like this and make sure I'm not touching the front and close to the front here. In a trail shoe, I'd want to have more space if I'm doing this. But in a marathon shoe, I'm not really going to be like this on the roads, and there's not going to be like variations in the grade and levelness of terrain, so I'm okay here. A couple more quick thoughts on this Cloudboom Strike 2 before I do a little road trail comparison here. I wanted to look at this drop in midsole here. You see there's a little bit of texture here. There's kind of a ridge down the center here, and also if you look inside, maybe difficult to tell, but there is a little bit of a ridge in the carbon speedboard there, it's kind of like a depression like this, an indentation that this little ridge fits into. So one thing you might be concerned about, and something that I did think about, was this midsole kind of moving around inside the shoe, especially at higher paces that you'd be running in road races and even marathoning. And I think that this little ridge here, it kind of slots right into that depression in the plate there, and I haven't noticed this moving around at all. Another thing that came to mind is reusability or recycling these types of midsoles, insoles, whatever you want to call it. I would call this, I would say, a drop-in midsole. There's no insole on top of this. Your heel area is directly on top of the Helion HF foam. They do have a nice top layer fabric here, so that's nice to give you a little bit of feel in that forefoot arch area. I haven't noticed any irritation. It's quite smooth. It's actually a nice fabric that they've worked in there. But as far as reusability or sustainability is concerned, perhaps as this Helion HF wears out, I'm not sure, maybe it could be a scenario, maybe so for this shoe. I have no inside information. This is just pure speculation and maybe down the line thinking. They're doing light spray stuff, obviously, saving weight, saving materials, processing, things like that. Sustainability aspects to the light spray process, but maybe if this gets worn out, if this gets squished out, or maybe similar type of shoe with a similar type of setup, you could perhaps sell something like this, you know, like a refreshed half of a midsole, so to speak. You do have this layer down below here, but I could see certain scenarios where this would work really well to just kind of, if you had that softer layer closer to the foot, as is typical, as you see with the Cloud Ultra Pro here, perhaps that gets compressed over time. You could make the lower level a little bit more durable. This is not necessarily specific to the Cloudboom Strike 2. Again, I'm just thinking out loud here. It could be cool to maybe like sell a drop-in midsole, and maybe, you know, N Normal did something like this, but they had the full midsole inside the shoe, and that didn't quite work as well. It was kind of moving and squeaking around here. This kind of half setup here seems to work really well. I do have my Speedland shoe here just for comparison. They have a similar thing here, but this is a, I don't know what they call this, elastomer type material here. It's not as energetic, I could tell. Definitely softer here with the Speedland drop-in from the LDVL versus this one from the Cloudboom Strike 2. Of course, you heard that rattling around here. You have the carbon fiber plate from the LDVL, and this hooks in there, and you can add that, but it is somewhat loose. It doesn't move around. I never noticed anything like that, but different setup here with the On. Obviously, this plate is baked into that lower level here, and this one just sits on top. So this seems to work really well. Obviously, with the Speedland, you can take it in and out. Here with the Marathon Super Shoe, you definitely want to have it in there. But just thoughts on this drop-in midsole in general. Last thing to this shoe specifically is the heel area. It's fantastic. They didn't skimp. It feels quite lightweight around here, but it is a deep layer, like the thickness of the pad that goes around and above the heel, around the edges here. It's nice and soft, nice and thick, and it doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel like there's a heavyweight foam in there. It feels like just like a nice lightweight foam in there, and there's a nice smooth brushed interior material all around the heel cup here, and it's just like awesome comfort there. I don't notice any type of irritation. Even this edging here, it's kind of just cut off there, and it's like a little suede-ish type engineered material, and it's just kind of like loose there, but it is soft, so I don't feel anything around this ankle collar, heel collar at all. And that is certainly an area when you're running in marathon shoes that can get you. You can get a little ankle bite. Certainly in the next percent too, I had big problems getting irritation on my Achilles from that. I had to like cut down the edge of that shoe in my later runs after I had had that issue in one marathon, but nothing at all in this shoe. Talked about the toe box being awesome. Midfoot hold is great. Talked about having to even loosen it up a little bit so I can have a comfortable feel around the middle of the shoe. And now here, moving to the rear, just a great heel here. So I've heard a lot of chatter recently, a lot of talk about why trail shoes cannot match the lightweight specifically of road shoes, perhaps the performance of road shoes. There's so many elements that go into it. The main thing is the outsole. When you look at a shoe's weight, if you go to an event like TRE or you go to some other weights where they have like the different components of the shoe, they normally have them on a little key ring, and you could kind of look at each part individually, the upper, different layers of the midsole, a plate if there's in there, then the outsole. If you take them one by one, the outsole is always the heaviest part. And these are two super shoes from On. Check out the differences in outsole here. This is actually a shoe that doesn't have a ton of outsole coverage, and as far as lug depth and lug coverage here, the Cloud Ultra Pro here, this would be probably on the skimpy side when it comes to trail shoes. I certainly haven't had any issues with this one. Certainly designed for more runnable terrain. You don't have a lot of lugs. They're not very thick, they're not very deep, they're not very chunky, but I can assure you the weight of this outsole is going to be significantly more than these strips of very thin road outsole. So that's just something you cannot get around in any trail shoe, let alone any trail super shoe. So this is 7.4 ounces here for the Cloudboom Strike 2, 9.8 ounces here, again, both in the US 10, EU 44. If you look at the uppers here, see-through, very nice material in the Cloud Ultra Pro. This is one of the lighter weight uppers here. Very great job here from On. Similar design here, but feels very solid, very structured. You have like a web of overlays, underlays inside of that material, but it's definitely more substantial in any type of trail shoe. You could see kind of like thicker elements here. You have a little bit of a, on this side at least, a stabilization element over here. You have more durable eyelet areas, and overall the material is going to need to stand up to more, you know, dirt and debris, more rubbing, more abrasion, that kind of stuff than any type of road shoe. So that's another element where you'll see increased weight gain. Also the tongue here. These are two very nice tongues here. Cloudboom Strike 2, didn't mention this, super light, super thin, feels like nothing, but they have, especially this upper area here, they have added padding in just strategic areas. There's two strips along the edges here. Despite how thin it is, despite how lightweight it is, I don't get any lace bite at all in this Cloudboom Strike 2. So they've done a good job of strategically putting these tiny areas of padding to eliminate any kind of lace bite at all, which is great. Similar to the Cloud Ultra Pro, they've done a great job here as well, but it's just, again, a touch thicker. You know, you're out there on the trails, you're thinking people are running 100 miles in this shoe versus running, say, 2 to 5 hours in this shoe. You're just gonna need a little bit more comfort over time in this shoe. So while this is quite lightweight, there's a little bit more bolstering here. It's a little bit thicker. The gusset here, there is no gusset in this one right here. It just kind of lays flat and straps down well enough so it doesn't move around. Here, you typically want to have gussets in a trail shoe. There's a lot more foot movement inside the shoe. Another area where you're adding weight. And then when it comes down to the midsole itself, the bounce of this midsole, it's a lot. It's great on the road. You have this CloudTec sphere, of course. Interested to see if they do anything like this in future trail models, but I'm not quite sure if this level of bounce would be suitable on trails. Of course, you want to have a wider platform, primarily in the heel here. I talked about this little area on the run here, giving a little bit of adaptability. You could see as I kind of flex that here, as you would touch down on the heel, I think it gives a bit of adaptability, which is great. Let's flex the shoe as a whole. It's a stiff carbon fiber plate. Again, it seems to like load and then unload as you go. Nylon fiberglass plate here in this one. Different kind of geometry, different kind of setup here. You don't have that loading and unloading in a trail super shoe as you do, at least in this road super shoe. A lot of road super shoes, when they have that rocker geometry, they can lean into the rocker lever action, which is what I get from the Rocket X3. This one leans into the bounce, load, and explode, so to speak, action here. A little different setup on a trail super shoe here, Cloud Ultra Pro. Nylon fiberglass plate. You have to deal with stability in different terrain in ways that you don't in road super shoe. So there's probably more width in here. It's probably a heavier weight material for durability. And This one leads into like a smoothness of efficiency versus that loading and exploding of the Cloudboom Strike 2. And you could probably look coming back to the platforms. I love the width of this super shoe on the road from On, but it's still not as wide as this one in the Forefoot. I talked about the Forefoot being wide for a road super shoe, but compared to a trail super shoe where you're adapting obviously to more terrain, it's even wider here, and also under the heel. You're just spending a lot more time on different areas throughout the ground platform when you're running on trails than you are when you're running on the road. On the road, you're landing here, around here, and you're just popping off. You don't have to worry about landing so much on the heel or using the heel so much for control when you're going on these various steep grades that you are handling out on the trail. So huge difference in width under the heel. You're talking about outsole, you're talking about differences in upper interior materials having to be more durable, a little bit more cushioned in a trail shoe. Then you're talking about platform width for stability, and also differences in foam. This lighter, more energetic foam, it's going to be more poppy. There's probably more air in it. It's definitely lighter weight, less volume of it. Here a little bit denser. Of course, you have the firmer layer on the ground for more control, with the softer feel underfoot. So you're going to have added weight in the midsole itself, which overall is less than the outsole weight, but there's 2.5 ounces difference between these two shoes. Obviously, I've had some trail super shoes that are lighter weight, but again, you'll typically see once you get to that 9-ounce range, that's kind of the lower limit for a lot of trail shoes, unless you get into like kind of a lot skimpier type of models. Not models that are high stack, wide platform, plated, that kind of thing. So I just think there's limits to what you can do with a trail super shoe. Of course, we're going to see advancements in the coming years. The foams are going to get lighter, the materials. I believe there's things they can do to bring these type of lightweight elements to an upper in a trail shoe, but they just have to, you know, keep an eye on durability in a shoe like this. Like these shoe, how long are you expected to run in this? You may run 2 marathons in it, 3 marathons as far as expected usage and durability, but people in a trail shoe, they're gonna want to run 100 miles at a minimum in this shoe, and that's 4 marathons worth. And plus, you're probably gonna want to run more in this shoe, train in this, and run even more than just one race in this shoe. So it's just a big difference. I really don't get a lot of the talk or comments or chatter about trail shoes being bad. I think this is a great time for trail shoes. In fact, it's a golden age for trail shoes. I have so many things coming up as far as trail super shoes with UTMB in the pipeline very soon. So you will see those on the channel. But for now, this is my top pick for a road super shoe. If I run a road marathon, we'll see what happens in the fall. It was really fun running the Munich Marathon back in the fall, so maybe I'll do something like that to maybe game up my speed leading into next season, as long as I could stay healthy. We're always assuming good health for the rest of this year and the upcoming season. So Cloudboom Strike 2, pretty awesome. Check these out at on.com. Like and subscribe to Humble Running, of course. Go to the website www.humblerunning.com. Sign up for my newsletter. Again, lots of cool stuff coming in, mainly on the trail, so I'll have lots of A/B comparisons definitely on the way, so you want to check those out. Sign up for the newsletter so you don't miss anything. Thank you for tuning into this one. I'll see you, perhaps, running fast out on the roads, or most likely out on the trails.